We are good. I think this is exactly what I thought when we had our little chat now. Maybe you can give an intro before I say anything about what we do, trying to aim for today, and then you let people know who you are and what you do and why I think it's a good idea to have you here on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's a pleasure being here and thanks for thinking of me. And oh gosh, a little intro. Well, I've been in the robotics space my entire career. Got out of college, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But I was really inspired by the cover of a Wired magazine that I saw once, and I just knew that was going to be what I was going to devote a large portion of my life to, and it's ended up being probably longer than that than I thought it was going to be. But just building humanoid building humanoids and humanoid robotics has been an obsession of mine for nearly 3 decades, and which is crazy to say that out loud because I'm like, I don't like really this long. It's been this long. I think I would have been further along, right? But yeah, I've changed my thinking in the last 10 to 15 years from the build the knowledge set on the technical side to the now how do we use that in the context of business. And so those are two big personalities that I have is the blend of technology, but also how technology shapes business. And that's really kind of entrepreneurship to some degree. And innovation, people say that word all the time, but it's sort of a bullshit word. Nobody really knows what it means. But to me, it's always meant invention plus commercialization. We're not a research lab. I have worked at them. They can be innovative, but that's kind of more research, right? So it's like, hey, this thing works. The little pixels are moving around on the screen and the algorithm is doing its thing. But that's innovation to me is like, okay, now let's do a checkpoint within the market where the market rewards you for that invention. And the combination of that's innovation. So that's what I have become inspired to do. And so what the introduction, right? So the introduction is I have gone from research to business in the context of entrepreneurship. And it's like that scene in there's a couple, well, um, it's the best job anybody could have. And it's a frustrating job, but it's a never-ending self-development and self-challenges in every facet of your life.
I think we get to this point more in depth, deeper on. But for everyone listening regularly to this podcast, I'm very much interested in the early days of the people I'm having the pleasure to talk to. So maybe you can tell me a bit about the early days. I'm always like to hear about things that inspired you. Have you been one of those kids that were interested in technology very early on, or was that something that you came across later in life? Yeah, maybe you can take me back as far as you like.
Yeah, really lower middle class upbringing in rural Indiana. So I grew up in the Hoosier state, and I was inundated with Indiana University, Purdue University, Notre Dame. Those were the three big pillars of Indiana, and I think I was always going to go to one of those three schools. But what's funny is I was the first one to go to college in my family, and specifically on my dad's side. So I didn't really have this. I didn't have a grounding that's what you did, right? I wasn't destined for Harvard because I was third generation Harvard. I was my parents directed me to college because they knew that was something that they wish they had done, but was never in reach for them. So that was the path I was on. But as far as what school to go to, they didn't know the difference between Harvard and the community college down the street, right? They didn't have that framing. So I got really lucky getting to the university that I did. But as far as the upbringing goes, uh, we fixed a lot of things, right? We didn't have money to buy new stuff, and just through that process of fixing things, grew an appreciation for how the world worked and the mechanics of motion and how things operated but here's the paradox is because I hated it because I viewed it as a necessity. Like we fixed things because we had to, because we couldn't buy new stuff. But it was only later that I appreciated that I got that view of it. And I was heavy into sports really early on. I was track and field was my entire life in high school and part of college. But I got a lot of health problems. I've got major arthritis. I was stricken with arthritis at a very, very early age. I have a prosthesis ankle. I've had many surgeries. I need many more surgeries. So it's been this sort of uh, overhang physically as I've tried to operate at a high level. When you're in my field, it's just energy, right? You're on a plane nonstop, you're going somewhere nonstop, you're constantly having to be this emotional source, or sorry, motivational source for a lot of the company. But some days you're just in a lot of pain. And so it gets hard to be balanced both. But getting back to what I was talking about, uh, I had to end my track and field career, and because of joint problems and arthritis. But sports that was a big psychological, uh, that was tough, right? You go from being a Big Ten decathlete to barely able to walk, a few years later. And it took a lot of mental. So I think that trained me, though. It really trained me how to endure and have that grit, and the tenacity. I tell people you need tenacious tenacity to be an entrepreneur. Like it's like you need double. Like it's like you need tenacity squared. So yeah, it was good training. But again, upbringing was just extremely like the all-American upbringing, though, from that standpoint. Incredible family out in rural community. You're right. Grew up in the 80s and in the 90s, and it was probably the greatest 2 decades ever in the history of the world. And uh,
I
and I
think
was really
people
fortunate.
our age tend to say this, right? So
I
yeah.
know, right? Exactly. But no, when you really think about that time period, it's just incredible. I mean, you see all those memes online and you're like, oh yeah, you're out riding your bike till the street lights came on. Like, yes, exactly. My
Mhm.
parents had no idea. When I was a kid, when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, parents had no idea where I was at.
Yeah, true.
No idea where I was at.
As I'm raising a little one now, I do feel the huge difference between that time and now. I do have a question though regarding the studies. When I can come back to the question that if technology was something that you have been interested very early on, you were talking about entrepreneurial spirit, you were talking about sports and what comes with it, like the grind and discipline, the work ethic. But as you are head of a technology company these days, is there something that we can find very early on as well?
Yeah. Again, it was tough because technology tend to be expensive, right? Like the new computer, I went through a phase, and most your listeners, unless they are of a certain generation, will not remember this, but you remember CB radios, like the Citizen Band radio. It was huge when I was a kid. I'm talking like 7, 8, 9 years old. You would have these. It was like another form of a ham radio, but different frequencies, where you kind of just get on and it's a public band and you can just hear, like truckers would use CB radios, right? And popularized in a bunch of old 70s movies, Smokey and the Bandit and stuff like that. But so like some of my first moment, my first thinking about electronics was just being fascinated, like that you could talk into this thing and then other people, like just out into the world, could respond back to you. And I was just like, that was so just fascinating to me. I mean, you understood the telephone, but the telephone is like, very point to point, very direct. Like there's a wire, you get it, right? But a CB radio is like, it was a common band. It was a frequency band that everyone could chat on within a certain range. And I always found that fascinating. And then my parents, when I was like in the seventh grade or something like that, eighth grade time frame, we kind of got our first computer. And it was, and then it just went vertical with me. And we had our the 286 and the 386 and the 486, the whole Pentium series back then. And it was like I just went down the rabbit hole because just learning DOS and learning when Windows came out and just learning the machinery of how the computer was working, it was like a fairy tale. It's hard to explain this, but you were entering a new world. And it was this world that you were just discovering. Every time you turn around a new corner, it was a new discovery of just a fascination. And that just cemented my obsession with just computers and how computers were constructed and how they were built. And that carried me through high school. And that's really what led me to electrical engineering at Purdue, was that trajectory. And I was at Purdue from 96 to 2000 as an undergrad. And that is literally right when the internet was hitting. So now just think about like Windows 95 comes out in 95, and that was the built-in browser in Windows that got everyone on the internet. It was still dial-up, obviously, but we were also in college. When I was in college, we were going through the ISDN, and the cable started coming out. We started going from 14.4, 9600 baud modems to 14.4 modems to 20, to 28.8 and 56K modems. And we would stay up in our dorms and we would pirate software. And we would my roommates and I, we would do rotations because as you're downloading the new pirated version of Photoshop, it would take the entire night to download. And you'd have to swap the floppy disks out. And so somebody would be sleeping while the other one was watching and make sure that the download didn't crash. That's like my freshman year in college. And so it's just fascinating. So the internet literally comes out when I'm in college. And so now you're thinking computers and information and communication, and the world started shrinking because now you're talking to people on the other side of the planet. And just it was just an exponential Cambrian explosion of possibilities. And that's what became so fascinating. But then now you combine computers and motion. And I remember the first time that I hit enter on a keyboard and saw something move, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then that started my love affair with being able to construct something that you can make move or command the motion of. And
We're talking about
and
the
I,
physical world now when it comes to
yeah,
most.
exactly. Yeah, no, I'm talking about like, so I remember the first time when I was in college and I stumbled upon like the robotics lab. And there was, you're starting to do a lab and you hit the enter key, and now your software program is changing the physical world, the hardware world. And so now you're blending the ones and zeros to the bits and atoms, and to the atoms, and so it's like the bytes to the atoms. And that to me, that bridge was just like, this is fascinating. And then I started getting more into like electromechanical motion, electric motors, and then long-winded story, I apologize, but
That's what
it
we're
was
here
a
for.
cover. I think it was the cover of either 2000 or 2001, year 2000 or 2001. I think it was 2000. Uh, there was there was a humanoid robot, but it wasn't a full humanoid robot. It was just a pair of legs. But it had a guy, it had his upper body, had a guy's upper body superimposed on a pair of humanoid legs. And I saw that and I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to build these kinds of things. And and NASA was recruiting at Purdue. Graduate, I get down to the Space Center, and I'm not working in the exact robotics group that I thought I was going to be working in. I was a flight controller, think like Apollo 13 movies where you got headsets on and people are out in space and you're talking to them, but I wanted to be in design, not operations. Like I didn't want to be in flight control. I wanted to be in design. And but that's how I got down to NASA. And this is what's hilarious. Like I thought I was going to be designing robots, and it's fascinating what you don't know at those ages. Like you're 22 years old, you don't know what end is up. You're just trying to figure so many basic things out. You're trying to figure out who you are and what you want to be and what you want to, just the arc you're trying to be on. But even to even have that understood is that's part of part of the roadmap is still like another layer above it, right? Like it's easy to look back almost 50 now, which is I'm almost 50, and look back and sort of it's easy to say, oh yeah, I mean kids should have shit figured out by certain. No, at 22, you are a absolute bumbling moron about life and what you want to do and what you could do and all of that stuff, right? But here's where it changed. This is the watershed moment that changed my life for absolutely forever. NASA, first of all, I got so lucky to even get a job at NASA, and that's another story. But um, NASA was laid out like a college campus because the thought was if NASA ever went bankrupt, Rice would take it over as like an extension campus or another campus, Rice University. So NASA leased the campus from Rice for $1 a year till just actually a couple of years ago. And so I'm walking around. I got lost because I'm still new. I mean, I've been there 6 months. There's 13,000 people that work at this installation, and think like university campus, but it's NASA. I get lost and I stumble into a building trying to find my way back to my office. And I'm walking down the hallway, and this is a piece of imagery that I will never forget, and it will stay with me for the rest of my life. I remember looking over to the left, and bolted to the wall was this robotic astronaut just sitting there with its arms out, full spacesuit, clearly a robot. And I can just to this day describe every little detail what I saw, because a flash of like, what the is this thing? Who's building it? Where did it come from? How did I not know about this? And better, how do I work here? How do I get into this facility? And it's like I push my nose up against the glass. I can see my breath on the window. And I'm like, I've got to work here, right? And when I left NASA 15 years later, I was running the lab.
I knew from the moment we have a chat before the episode that you were a storyteller, and I'm so glad that you said yes to our conversation very easily, actually. I mean, you're taking us with you, and this is what I love about this podcast. I have the opportunity to, it's like reading, right? It's listening to a story from someone else and having the opportunity to be with them for a second. Um, Thank you for that. The I guess I mean being European, being German, we do have our own space agency, right? And we do a little bit here and there. But I mean I remember I started mechanical engineering, and then I switched later on for a couple of semesters to aerospace engineering. And I remember that I was very old when I started studying, so I was like 30 and everyone was like 20. And I remember the majority of these kids, right? For me, if you're 30, then 20, you feel
They're
that
kidding.
you're surrounded by kids.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Even though when you're 20, you think that the world belongs to you and you're like very adult. Anyways, everyone was a lot of these guys were wearing SpaceX t-shirts, and they were staying up late at night to watch some rockets go up the air. So I can really see that I've never been like this so much interested in space, but I really felt that I can see that how this can be magical to people and really be consumed in that. So I'm very happy that you somehow found your dream place and then even more specific there. But what I would like to do is asking two or three questions in that time period, because I do have a lot of people from academia, students reaching out to me, being my DMs. What would you suggest of doing? Because there's so many things that you can do, especially in robotics, right? The field is so open. How do you get not lost? What will be the next big thing? Uh, did the topic found you, as you said, and you were just very clearly describing the situation, or was that something that there was struggle, there was being lost,
No,
or was that for you? You were one of the lucky ones that had one situation
no,
versus
no,
a lot
no.
of smaller situations
No,
and
it's actually
decisions.
it's much worse than that. I went into engineering because my friends were going to school. Like I'm getting ready to graduate, and I'm getting ready to graduate high school. It's junior year. People are starting to do college trips. And I told my dad, I was like, hey, we need to start looking for colleges. And he's like, yeah, yeah, we should do some college trips. I had no idea what I was going to study. Like this is still, I had no idea. Like in fact, like God, it is hard to impress upon someone the absolute naivete in which I even understood professions outside of a doctor or a lawyer. You everybody you come in contact with those a lot, right? But engineering, like it was like that even that word I didn't even understood what it meant, like as a junior in high school. But I had some friends that were kind of like a little bit more of the well-to-do crowd, and they're all like they were doing college trips to schools to study engineering, and I was like, oh, tell me about that. What is that, right? Well, you do mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, all this kind of stuff. I was like, oh, that's cool. So, and then Purdue called me, recruiting me to do track and field. In high school, I set records. I was really, to this day, I still hold the high jump record at my high school. I just visited it recently, and there, my name was still on the plaque, 30 years later,
Good for the
31
ego,
years
though.
later. Yeah, yeah, it was a little good for the ego. But so I get a call from Purdue, and they're like, we want you to come run track here. And I was like, great. So I ended up getting to the university on the track and field team because they called. And and then I enrolled in engineering, right? I didn't seek Purdue out because it's literally a top 10, top 5 engineering university in the States. I just ended up there. And I wish it was more planned out than that. But life, I think everyone needs to be open to the fact that almost nobody has it figured out. And we all like to give everyone the appearance that we do. But what you need to have is a process of discovery and finding the right answer and finding yourself as you go. You're not going to have very few people outside of those that have been destined for the upper echelon because they went to private schools and they were trained and they were sequestered, they did equestrian and the weekends and they did polo, right? I mean, they were part of the Yale's private club when they were little kid. Like outside of that very small slice of people, everyone else is just trying to figure this shit out as you go through life. You might have like a weather vane of a direction, like I'm heading over there, but don't even for a second think that you know the exact steps and paths you're going to take outside of the big ticket items. Like maybe you should get educated. Even when I got to NASA, I was a flight controller in the robotics group, but I was a flight controller and discovered this is not what I want to be doing. So a friend of mine and I, and this is kind of like the first itch of my entrepreneurship, a friend of mine and I started a nonprofit rocketry group where we wanted to be the first amateur group to launch a rocket into space because we were bored. We were literally bored. We're like, we're just not getting the design experience that we want. We don't want to lose our engineering. We just come out of college, and so all these equations are fresh in our minds in the labs, and but yet then you get to your real job and you don't use any of it in the sort of flight control operational side, and you're like, well, we're losing it. We got to build some shit, right? And so we started this thing called the Amateur Spaceflight Association, and we had the self-proclaimed ambition of being the first amateur group to launch a rocket into space. We did 7 launches. We built a rocket from 5 feet to one that was 25 feet tall. We actually camped out in the Texas desert for a week and a half, clearing airspace with the FAA to launch this enormous rocket that we were parked way too close to. And I have those little videos to this day, and I can
Would love to
still
see
draw.
them.
Oh, I'll send them to you. I still draw so many awesome experiences from that moment. And this is actually about the time SpaceX was starting because SpaceX, we were hearing buzz around this new space company called SpaceX, and they were not what they are today. Like you can't imagine SpaceX today as what it was back in 2000, 2001, 2002. And But here's the thing, like that led me to meeting people, that led me to getting involved in things. And then when I discovered that lab called the Dexter's Robotics Lab on site at NASA, I knew people in similar circles, and then that led me to getting there. And here's where I think most people just don't understand that it's almost it's almost sort of seemed as a negative, but networking is the lifeblood. Networking is the lifeblood of all the positive motion that can happen in your life because you can't do everything on your own or any of it actually. It's always partnerships, it's always relationships, it's always developing those relationships. All the great things that have ever happened in my life is because I decided to take some initiative on somebody that I met, or they took initiative on meeting me. And you have this incredible moment where things happen, and then that springboards into something else, and you parlay that into something else. That is everything. That right there is everything. And I don't know if a lot of people like it's almost downplayed sometimes. I mean, yeah, you go to a meetup or you go to this or you go to that. Yeah, but that, and they're like, oh, it's bullshit. No, no, it's not. It's only bullshit because you're not taking advantage of the situation.
I was just about to say this. I had a call earlier today, and I think you're totally right that if uh, y- you are the one who needs to make it happen, right? So there's opportunities that are passing by, and you need to take them. But then there's also the option of creating possibilities for yourself. And I think here networking can be something, right? You do need to have balls, just go over and talk to people. I think this is something that the majority of people are missing when it comes to networking, right? And maybe and here being a little bit more intentionally, like as soon as you figured out how these things are working, this is great for doing, right? And yeah, I totally agree with you that if
Well,
you
here's
have
the problem. Here's another misconception. People are like, "Oh, that's just not who I am,"
mm,
or "I don't know how." It's just no. These are learned behaviors. Somebody was. I mean, again, I do a little bit of mentoring on the side, and I just want. I have this feeling that I really want to take all of the hard fought lessons learned through all these years of the trajectory I've been on, right, wrong, or indifferent, and I'd like to just help anyone that I can avoid mistakes that I've made. And over time, I've gotten pretty good at giving an investment presentation. I have to do that a lot. And as you mentioned earlier about just being having to be a storyteller, that it's a lot of storytelling, being able to provide an arc, a beginning, a middle, and an end of a concept. And then you wrap that into some technology and a business proposition, and you got a pitch. And somebody was like, yeah, I'm just not good at that. Like, I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to have my own company one day. But those are parts of my personality I just don't possess. Or I could never do it in the way that you did it. I go, I couldn't do it in the way that I'm doing it now 20 years ago. I was like, we train ourselves on so many different things. You want to learn how to play the piano? It doesn't happen overnight. You have to practice at it. You want to become an engineer? You're going to have to go to school and practice at it, study it. When it comes to giving presentations, people just think you either have it or you don't. It couldn't be more further from the truth. This is a learned behavior. You have to be a little malleable. You have to be open to changing some of your techniques as you do when you learn anything new. But I guarantee you, anyone out there, if they genuinely wanted to, could learn all of the arts involved in giving presentations, networking, connecting with people. These are learned behaviors. Now, some people have a natural affinity for it, or they're predisposed to maybe starting at chapter 2 instead of chapter 1, but everybody can get to chapter 5.
I think what is missing here is the point that a lot of people uh, they don't believe they can do it, And I think here, this is the reason why you said no one can do it on its own. This is what this podcast is for, right? If I would have a few people listening to this and then like, this guy is actually right, right? This is
Even if you change one person's mind, you were successful.
yeah. I mean, this is it sounds very cliche, but it is what it is. I've seen so many people succeed in that are so much mediocre, and other people who are much better, but missing that piece of skill, right? Um, but I mean, thank you so much for sharing this. I think so many people that I have on the podcast are too much of an engineer and not so much of a storyteller to be able to articulate this in the way you did with that kind of enthusiasm. Um, but yeah, bridge that to what you guys are doing today. I do know there's a few pieces missing. Maybe you can mention them, what's happening between this and that. But I do think it's very valuable to mention them.
Well, I'll summarize just very quickly the lily pads that I jumped on to get to Persona. So 15 years at NASA, we were building a robotic astronaut. So it was a anthropomorphic system. It was started out as an upper body, two arms, a head, body, and the whole concept was there's a lot of money in space tools, and and we need a lot of automation in space, especially building the space station. And we're going to probably need to have robots that can interface with those already human rated space tools. So for literally a decade, we were studying the tenets behind building a robot that had qualities that mapped to a person, from dexterity to vision to the range of. I think we're getting a bad connection here.
That's better again.
Let's pause. Yeah, sorry about that. Was it me? Hopefully it's not me. Oh, crap. I'm on a bad network. I just noticed. Sorry.
It's good.
Can we pause and can I switch networks? Would that kill everything?
Yeah, switch it.
Yeah, never mind. We'll just keep running with this.
Yeah.
Switch it. I'm gonna switch it real fast. We're back. There we go.
There we go.
I was connected to like a building over there for some. I'm shocked it's been doing this well. So, for those 15 years I was at NASA, our entire focus was building humanoids. And that's kind of been the holy grail in robotics for a long time. And you can trace these all the way back to Wobot and some Japanese research that was done, and then KIST, the Korean Institute of Science and Technology, that was a big part of it, and the DLR even, the German Space Agency. We had a lot of work with the German Space Agency, and got to know the director over there at the Mechatronics Lab, Gerd Hertzinger, and Eileen Schaefer took over for him. And they've had a lot of incredible companies spin out of the DLR as of late. But yeah, I was just obsessed with that whole idea. It was incredibly inspiring, and especially at NASA, you're just working around some of the best and brightest minds anyone could hope to start a career with. It's very inspiring, and made you just want to come to work every day and be better, because the people you were working around were so talented. They were so much smarter than you. They challenged you every day. So when I was there, I went back and I got my master's degree in electrical engineering from Purdue. I did it absentia, so I was doing it part-time, traveling back up to Indiana to do research over the summers, et cetera. It took me 5 years. And what I'd learned in those 15 years that I was there is that NASA is really good about learning how to control robots in faraway locations and get them to usefully interact with the world around them. And I wanted to leave the space agency and become an entrepreneur. I was inspired by this idea of carrying my Starbucks coffee cup through the threshold of an office building of a company that I was creating. Like that, just I could not get that idea out of my head. Like that's what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, was to be in charge of, or in part in charge of the destiny of the company. Partly because when you're at NASA, you are constrained by huge layers of management above you. And that could be a whole nother podcast that we should come back to at some point, which is just, yeah. So you kind of get disenchanted. You go through these phases in the government. You're amazing to work there. First phase. Second phase is like, okay, this is interesting, but annoying. The third phase is just like, screw this place. The government's ridiculous, and I can't do this anymore. No matter the mission still is amazing being at NASA, but the bureaucratic machine starts to wear on you quite a bit. So I left, but I said, hey, listen, uh, we had, before that, we had a lot of people come through the lab and they were like, have you ever thought about taking this Robonaut, which was the name of the robot, this technology and putting it underwater? And the first time you hear it, you kind of dismiss it and you're like, yeah, that's interesting, but like we put robots in space. Like, I don't really care about the ocean, along with most people on the planet, by the way. And then like the third time you hear it, you're kind of like, all right, well, tell me more because this keeps coming up. And then you learn that underwater is fascinating. The work that goes on, the vitality of the ocean to life on this planet. 90% of all species in the world are aquatic, and it goes on and on and on. And so now enters the next 10 years of my life, which is taking Robonaut and putting it underwater, which we called Aquanaut, to do autonomous seabed manipulation. We had a bunch of work with DoD and Intel related parties, energy infrastructure, and it was fascinating. It was my first try at being an entrepreneur. I couldn't even spell VC back then. I had no concept of what it meant to raise money. Learned how to do it, learned how to make investment presentations, grew that company, went from my living room to the NASDAQ over a 10-year period of time. Just an incredible wild ride. Started several other tech companies along the way. And my good friend Jerry Pratt and I, who I've known about 20 years, we'd had this dream for a very long time to start a humanoids company. And but it was just never the right time for both of us, right? Like we kind of got really close to doing it once. Uh, he was always unavailable. I was always unavailable. He became the CTO at Figure. I was still involved with my company, but then we both, for the first time in our careers, we were both available. And we said, hey, this embodied AI thing, especially humanoids, this thing is taken off. We know a little bit about that. So we're not going to let two grad students from Stanford run away with this thing. So we started Persona. And we took like the first 6 months and did a lot of thinking. We talked to investors, trying to understand the appetite for strongly differentiated versus me too's, and because it's a huge market, right? It's going to be more than one winner here. And we talked to a lot of clients on what they were looking for, what their willingness to adopt was, what their purchasing power was. And we formulated this thesis, which I believe is an extremely contrarian view to the current humanoid market. And we said, I think the entire humanoid robotics commercial market has it wrong. That's the pitch for Persona. We don't believe in any of the popularized markets. We don't think they're going to be adopted in the home anytime soon. We think fulfillment in a warehouse or sorting letters, sorting packages, think those are really terrible business cases. We don't think the automotive market is going to pull these robots in at any scale anytime soon. But when you look at the skilled trades in the heavy industrial applications, like energy infrastructure, shipbuilding, steelworks, the markets that are under an onslaught of labor scarcity, that have extremely high labor economics, that have semi-structured, predictable environments, that have task tractability that's pretty high, and where the technology feasibility cost is not terribly high, that sounds like an interesting market. And so we formulated this thesis. We formed a partnership with the largest shipbuilder in the world to deliver a humanoid robot welder to them in 24 months. And that was the beginning of Persona.
I mean, it's interesting to say Because when we think about humanoids, and especially if you see in some companies, I was just talking the other day to someone else that you can see on Figure's website, for example, you see all those automotive stuff. Even though on X you can see the BMW case very present, but when if you go on the website looks different than it used to, right? Now the website looks very much homey, so you can see how they imagine. Okay, maybe automotive is a bit too hard to really deliver value and repeatability and durability and precision in a cost-effective way. So why not homes, right? And it's interesting to see that the website more looks like an Apple website now. But apart from that, logistics seems always to be a very good case, right? Some sort of structured, and always the same kind of use cases. But it's interesting that you say, okay, maybe it should be not one of them, right? And was that how did you came across that? Because you did so much thinking that must have been inspired by. Was it something specific, or was that through a very thoughtful process of talking to potential customer?
Yeah, several things were in motion. I had entered a doctorate program for business where I was through these conversations that we were having with clients, I realized that there has been no serious thought given to the market or the business model uh, of how humanoids are going to be adopted. And so I decided to create a doctoral dissertation around it. So I've been studying these markets now formally for a couple of years, and I'm writing a dissertation on it that I'm defending next May. So I've I don't know of many other people that have put this much thought into their go-to-market plan, but just for example, you mentioned home and you mentioned so a couple things to unpack quickly. When I was at NASA, we had work with General Motors. So General Motors came in and they funded the evolution from Robonaut 1 to Robonaut 2. So we were working really closely with General Motors, and that gave me deep insights into the psychology of the automotive partner. And here's really what it boils down to. The automotive assembly line is unforgiving. These guys are pushing a car off the end of the assembly line like once a minute, something like that. I don't know if it's once every 2 minutes, once every 30 seconds. I don't know, but it's like once a minute. The cycle times are brutal. The problem that you've got is in the robotics community, we've been really long on promises and short on delivery for a long time. So our bar for what we find acceptable in the field is much lower than what a commercial client would find acceptable. Meaning, if the robot were to actually do the task, we're all going to be high-fiving each other, popping champagne. The automotive client's going to say, well, it did it in 17 seconds, but our cycle time's 11. So come back to us when it hits 11. And going from 17 to 11, that might be another 2 years worth of work and another $1 billion of input. Because as you start getting into the marginal increases of, going from a 17-second cycle time to a 16-second cycle time to a 15-second cycle time, that the incremental input in there is an enormous amount of cash, but only a little bit more gain. So I learned that the automotive clients are probably not who you want to put front and center. And if you do, you're going to do a task that's a little bit more buffered on the first part of the assembly line, where it's kind of looks more like a living warehouse. People don't make a lot of money there, which means the business case isn't very strong. Similar to warehousing. Trying to displace a $15 an hour Amazon warehousing fulfillment worker is a really bad business case. Better would be going to where people are highly compensated, but nobody wants to do the work. Those are the better markets. And then the home, what world are we living in right now?
I like the way you framed this. It's so too funny. Because I mean, if I'm opening like X right now and looking at some companies, some launches upcoming, they're promising this. I mean, there's some companies I really respect, and what you see, what they're doing. I think Tau Robotics, they just came out with a new video. I think that person is doing cleaning in your home for $30 an hour. So
$30 an hour?
yeah,
Yeah, so that's funny. Uh,
Have you seen the video?
no, I haven't, but let's just lump them all in together. If you look at the home market, I haven't yet to have any trouble calling a cleaning service to come clean my home that would show up literally the same day, work extremely affordably and really quickly. The problem also is that the home is chaotic. First of all, they're all chaotically different. Second, they're chaotic in general. So then it comes down to utilization. You want to find activities where the duty cycle, the utilization of the asset over time is very high. So that means the robot needs to be on site a lot. If it's on site a lot, it's going to be interacting with the house pet and the dog, maybe a 3-year-old or 4-year-old hanging on its leg as it's trying to walk through pushing a vacuum cleaner. Or worse, as you've trained your humanoid robot to make the kids lunch before school, the 3-year-old is hanging on the leg of the robot while the dog is nipping at its ankles and it's trying to, put peanut butter and jelly on the bread and pack the sack lunch for the kid while it's handing the coffee to the guy running down the stairs and the woman heading off to work. Like, what are you talking about? Like, can we all just stop this shit? That's not happening. And even if you could get a small parcel of that to work, there's no fucking business model. There's no utilization that makes any sense at the asset level for any acceptable ROI. Zero. It doesn't exist. So then you're going to say, well, okay, well, we're going to dupe these guys into buying a platform. Maybe Leonardo DiCaprio will buy your first humanoid platform for his house, and that's going to be your entire market for about 5 years.
I'm really curious to because I mean I will always promote I'm always promoting the podcast with snippets and so I think this is so this is
You think you just found it?
this is just glorious and I'm sending this to a few people that I know personally in that space to get some engagement on the episode. No, I'm very happy that you're so controversial. I think it is necessary to. I mean, some parts of this is very much true from a mathematical point of view, right? I just do the math. But then I think
What's controversial?
roboticists,
What's controversial is that I'm controversial.
yeah.
That's what's crazy about this. Everybody is drinking the same romanticized, popularized science fiction-y Kool-Aid, and they've mapped it to the PC in every home, and they're trying to say there's going to be a humanoid in every home, and they are actually correct. That will happen in 20 years. We have a lot shorter timeline to work with here at Persona.
Hmm. What I was about to say is that there's two things to it, right? There's the can we do it kind of thing, right? If you don't aim for that, then it will last much longer to be able to do it. And using that hype, because if you think about this, right, there are these very young, fresh minds coming out of university, and now the hype is real. And now normally you do need to fight 30%, 40% of your time in academia to get money from a third party to finance your position in the first place so you can study for 2 more years on that subject, whatever that might be. And now we have this hype going on where people have very deep pockets, and you just need to have a few slides and talking about this $1 trillion market, and now they like pouring money over you, and this is Disneyland to you, right? You're working with the most exciting technology, compute, hardware, and people about to make something real that, from a business perspective, it is a bit hard to justify, at least where we are at the moment, right?
You've hit the nail exactly on the head. And let me tell you what 89% of the humanoid community has done is imagine all of these researchers for most of their career has fought tooth and nail to fund the humanoid robot. And the funding was so small for so long. And now they realize that all they have to do is put together a pitch deck and someone's going to give them millions of dollars for them to go off and build a lab and build a robot. I'd say the lion's share of those people have no real interest in trying to figure out what the business case is. And it goes back to the division between first-time founders and multi-time founders. First-time founders, it's all about technology, right? They're obsessed with the technology. It's like that is what they think about nonstop. Your veteran founder is obsessed with go-to-market and what the business model is going to be. The technology is almost like an afterthought. It's like, who's going to use it? Who's going to buy it? What are they going to pay for it? And how are we going to make more of them? And then how are we going to make the company a cash flowing machine? That's what I'm obsessed about.
How big's the team now?
90.
90. I mean, you raised some money too, right? So, but not like
No,
crazy amount of money.
we've not raised a lot of money. We raised a $42 million pre-seed. We are closing around as we speak. That's over 100 million for a seed round. And it's not, we've been around about 18 months, right? We had 5 people in the company 18 months ago.
It is exciting. I mean, I hope that a few people will watch this and thought about this and talk about this because I think if we don't want to have this AI winter again, right? Where we promise too much and delivering not enough, and companies failing, and then there will be a domino effect, and then it will be much harder to do anything in that space. So I very much hope that this will work out on a larger scale. Um, but I mean, as we're coming towards the end of our conversation, which hopefully we'll find a second episode later on. Uh, so where you guys are at? You were just talking about some financial aspects here, but maybe you can talk a bit about the technology side of things. You said that you were promising your customers like humanoid that can weld within their time frame. Where you guys are at?
Yeah, so we launched a program. So we got hooked up with HD Hyundai last year, the beginning of the year, and we outlined a 24-month plan to get a robot that we could start the commercial activities on by the beginning of 27. So basically 24 months, and we're ahead of schedule. So we shipped our first couple robots there a couple weeks ago to lay the groundwork for the production batch that's already in work. We're sending them units at the end of this year in November. Those dates have actually been public, so I don't mind talking about them. And we are 100% down the middle of the fairway on schedule. Now, one thing that we did not talk about that I will end the podcast on, which has been fascinating. Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much
taking the lead here. I appreciate it.
for such an incredible host. One thing that I have grown less tolerant of over time is it seems to be trendy now to launch your company and say, look what we did in the last 90 days. We only did this in 3 months. We just started and we just got a pilot going in 3 months. If only that was true. And I'll just leave it at that.
Interesting thoughts. Nick, I met you the first time just the night before Makina. I think that was a great dinner that we had. Thank you so much for the energy that you brought to the table. And I knew that this was going to be a funny, interesting, dynamic episode. I was, I was not surprised that this was just what happened. And I'm looking closely to what you guys are doing, especially as you said that you guys have a different take on things, right? I do work with a lot of startups in that space. So I've seen a lot of startups that are still in stealth and how far they are when they're coming out and telling everyone that they did this in the last 6 months or 90 days. And I'm curious to see how things will play out in 6 months time, 12 months time, because when you raise this amount of money, and I've been in one of those companies raising this amount of money, and the numbers that you're promising to the board and to the investors, then that you do need to deliver on. It is hard. It is very hard on so many levels. And so I'm very curious to see how things will play out for you. And thank you so much for giving us such insights and also giving us so much from you, because this podcast is about the people behind the technology, behind the companies. And I think you did. I couldn't have asked for a better guess.
Oh, that is too kind. And incredible host, as I mentioned earlier. I love your interview style, and I can't wait for the second episode.
Thanks, and talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.